The opening sequence of episode 31 is very much a tone setter for everything to follow. On a very fundamental level, this episode is much different from everything we've seen before. While the series is usually chock full of Chekhov's gun-like hints that you can follow in a mostly linear fashion, this episode is all about distractions and false promises. Absolutely everything in this episode is constructed to make you feel uneasy, but about the wrong thing. So we'll be talking plenty about this duality of the unfolding narratives and why the true reveal of the Marley duo hits on a completely different level. An important thing to keep in mind with the first half of this episode is that we are currently operating with some pretty important information asymmetry. In-universe, the scouts have already been briefed on the quite extensive evidence against Reiner and Bertolt. And while we, hindsight enjoyers, have talked about all of this for literal hours now, from the story perspective, we are never given any reason to suspect that there might be an ulterior motive to anything going on here. And so the thing you have to keep in mind for a lot of this episode is that the sense of bleakness and somber truths is not only a result of the Ymir reveal, but also the somewhat chilling question of, could there have really been even more traitors in our midst? Annie was always quiet and standoffish, so while that betrayal hurts, there were at least some breadcrumbs there already. Well, with Reiner, his most distinctive trait we've heard is that he is a natural leader and a protector. So could it really be that he too is an enemy? Plenty more on this throughout the episode. Though what is far more important now, while I talk a lot about the somber realization of potentially more traitors, the opening rather focuses on the name reveal of Historia and Ymir's Titan, deliberately diverting our attention to those events rather than what we'd actually be seeing in this episode. With these recaps, there's the obvious angle of practicality, right? It's still a recap first and foremost, so purely from a practical sense, the reminder of the big reveal of Historia's name would sort of make you believe that we'd immediately be addressing that, but we never do. And the same goes for Ymir. Instead of splicing in those very sus scenes of Reiner and her talking about an entirely different language, all of that is quickly swept under the rug, because again, the show is deliberately diverting our attention away from Reiner, something that we'd be seeing countless times throughout the big wall sequence. Though with all the overarching themes aside, with this being another pivotal moment in the narrative, we of course see the return of Armin's narration briefly retelling the events of Utgard, and then saying, after the battle, they learned a surprising truth. Clearly, in the context of the recap, this is referring to Ymir's transformation and Historia's real name, again throwing us off the scent of what is actually going to happen in this episode. But because this is overanalyzing, and Armin usually frames these events with knowledge they currently possess, I think you could also easily take the surprising truth to actually be the reveal of Reiner and Burrito. But okay, that's a tad overanalyzing. As for the title of the episode, Warriors, in hindsight, this one's of course obvious. But even on initial viewing, it is certainly a very heavy hitter considering just how carefully specific words are spoken in the series. Like, again, even small things like coffee existing are a huge reveal. You need to pay attention to these tiny details. So at this point, if you had been following very closely, you will have noticed that the word warrior is only used in a few quite odd scenes. Most notably, Annie claiming that she failed to become a warrior moments before transforming, and more recently, Reiner and Bertolt's somewhat uncanny conversation about him being more of a warrior back in the day. So unlike much of this episode, which would purposely hide Reiner and Bertolt in the background, the title just boldly tells us exactly what we'd be seeing. Moving into the episode itself, from the very first moments, we hit the ground running, with each and every single thing here being an explicit choice to slowly build suspense and put us in a almost subconscious feeling of anxiety. The very first shots we get are of a storm setting in, something that is very much used as a almost universal tool to convey some sort of uncertainty, fear, or sense of impending doom. Even in Attack on Titan, we've already seen this back in Trust, with their two dark clouds setting in as soon as Eren supposedly died. Weather in general is something you really want to pay attention to in this episode. It's one of those things that are sort of second nature, and no, that is not a pun, but as I always say with these small things, you have to remember that someone sat down and made the deliberate choice to have this reveal be set during an ominous storm, right? So as soon as you see something like that, it is a pretty major red flag that something is about to go down. The only thing that sort of complicates things is that in this episode we are dealing with multiple big revelations at the same time. So as of right now, sure, things are spooky, but considering the events of Utgard, naturally, you're expecting to see more of that. But speaking of red flags, before we even get to the scouts, one of the first shots we get in this episode are of 3 red flags blowing in the wind. Or, in other words, Annie, Reiner, and Bertolt. The 3 people we currently suspect of being linked, of being traitors, and of being Titan shifters. And like, let's be honest, with the events of Utgard, Reiner at least is certainly a walking red flag right now. I also think there's an argument to be made that these are not the Marley trio, but rather Bertolt, Reiner, and Ymir, as all 3 would now reveal themselves as Titans. Alternatively, you could take the red flags to be warnings of Reiner's traitor status. Notably, he asks where Eren is and clearly demonstrates that his plans were different, so strike number 1. He then inscribes a message on Annie's palm and she clearly responds to that intel, so strike number 2. And now strike number 3, the one that breaks the whole thing open. He literally tells Eren who they are. But you know, I could also overanalyze a little bit. With how this episode is initially positioned with Ymir and Historia being the pivotal characters, and us not yet knowing that the scouts here are already uneasy over different suspicions, I think you could also interpret the flags to be Annie, Ymir, and Historia, all 3 of whom have turned out to be completely different people than what we thought they were. But to further up that tension, we hear this uneasy pulsing beat coming in as we see Ymir raised up the wall, yet again implying that her newly unveiled Titan status would be the primary topic of discussion throughout the episode. Though note what happens next. We see Eren and Keiji exchange a few words, with Keiji saying that if she were a normal person, she'd be long dead, with Eren then briefly getting lost in thoughts and mumbling to himself about the whole normal parts. And surprise surprise, literally the preceding scene is Reiner struggling to get up the wall. Again, remember that someone sat down and deliberately wrote that scene. To me, it is absolutely not a coincidence that we go from Eren pondering the normality of the Titan shifters only to immediately turn to Reiner, who, for what is basically the first time in the series, is exhibiting exactly that. He's struggling, giving you the sense of normalcy. And the same goes for Eren immediately reaching out to help Reiner. A very obvious reminder of their very strong bond, only to subvert it literally moments after. Don't forget that up to this point, we have basically never really seen Reiner struggle at all. He was always the one helping others around him, from carrying Armin's stuff way back during their training, to him giving ODM gear tips to Eren, to him supposedly saving Armin from the literal grasp of the female Titan, etc, etc. But with Zeke now entering the picture and the events of Utgard, things are very quickly changing. And so, in his first case of vulnerability, it is Eren reaching out to him, showing us that that bond isn't simply a practical case of Reiner's strength compared to many of his allies. No, it is a genuine bond, with Eren now returning the favor. And to further hammer that home, we then focus on their clasped hands, and then the smile on Eren's face. As we'd see in the flashback of them being briefed on everything going on here, we'd clearly see how he was the only one opposing all of these suspicions. He was absolutely in denial. So seeing Reiner struggle to get up, not regenerate, and act like just the friend he always knew, Eren is he's happy, he's relieved. This is not an Annie situation. But alas, this is Attack on Titan, so we all know where this is headed. Though yet again, this episode is all about distractions, so with this super brief scene that might even make you ask, wait, why did you even show us that? We then switch to the background conversation of Historia pleading with Hanji, just telling them that Ymir is still their ally. And note how Hanji here does not say a word, they don't ask any questions whatsoever, they simply hear her out and then say, I see, naturally I'm hoping she'll be willing to cooperate with us. This will be addressed very explicitly later in the episode, but the reason why Hanji appears just to write all of this off isn't because they've already had their fun Titan experimentation times with Eren. No, they are more than aware that another Titan shifter entering the fray from right under their noses is a monumental deal. Rather, it is literally just a case of no longer knowing who they can even trust anymore. Again, the scouts made their way over here with the explicit command to not give off absolutely any sense that Reiner and Bertolt might be suspects. Something that obviously has already put everyone on edge. But when they arrive, they see an entirely new shifter in Ymir. So Hanji here being stone cold and largely dismissal is rather a case of them trying to keep the situation as calm as can be across the board. No investigations, no wackiness, nothing. Keep in mind that at this point, every single Titan shifter has come from within the group, with the exception of the monkey, of course. But we did so much work to isolate them from the Annie mission, which, by the way, they are still completely unaware of, but as of right now, we just do not want to alarm them in literally any way, just in case Ymir also happens to be associated with Annie. And that is best exemplified with the next couple of lines, with Hanji saying she might be a simple person, but the rest of the world is starting to become a little too complicated. which is of course true in so many ways. From Hanji's perspective, they are now thinking about Ymir from Ilse's notebook. They are also thinking about Historia's true identity and the depths of why exactly was it kept secret all along. And on top of all of that, their mind is absolutely racing about the prospects of Reiner and Burrito both being shifters, made more complicated by the fact that Reiner is clearly injured but not exhibiting any regeneration, which naturally spurs up the question, can he control it, or was that simply a coincidence and he's not even a Titan? But the point I'm getting at here is that even this is slowly building suspense. Just at the back of your mind, you have to be thinking, why is Hanji so calm? What is going on here? And that results in this weird uncanny sense that, why is everyone so calm? But in actuality, their mind is racing overtime. What they're doing is simply acting as if it's just another Tuesday, saying, oh yeah, we still need to patch up the wall, right guys? All of you are so excited about Ymir being a shifter, but we already have Eren, right guys? No reason to be worried. Marley squad, please don't attack. So yes, another subtle way of slowly diverting your attention. Though we then shift back to Eren and Reiner, with Eren asking whether his arm is okay. Which yes, to me, is another deliberate reminder of, oh look, they sure are good friends, aren't they? Keep in mind that in Season 2, this is the first time we're even seeing them together. Or, if you were following the series originally, they haven't been together for like literally 4 years. So yeah, for many, a much needed reminder. Though it's here where we continue with what we saw in Utgard, Reiner's first proper dance with death left a very big mark, with him clearly nearing his breaking points. He says that this is the second time already, telling Armin to remind Eren about how the female Titan almost killed him. But the thing to note here is that, of course, Annie never aimed to kill him. So while Soldier Reiner says that it was horrifying, Warrior Reiner never even considered it. But with the events of Utgard, both Reiners were jolted awake, with us being very deliberately shown the clear parallels of Marcel's death, which too came out completely out of left field. So the reason why Reiner never had this sort of meltdown after Annie is because again, he was never really in danger. But in this case, he absolutely was. And naturally, that shakes him to his very core. And before we move on, huge big red glowing disclaimer here. I've mentioned this many times before, but I'm a sub and dub enjoyer, and my perfect experience is probably a mix of certain aspects from both. But the dub here makes a huge blunder and really messes up major parts of the story. That is, unless it's deliberate. In the sub, and this isn't a subtitle issue either, you can clearly hear it in Japanese as well, Reiner says he almost died to the female Titan. Just like he should, considering he's still undercover and quote-unquote shouldn't know that it's Annie. But in the dub, he straight up calls the female Titan Annie. A fact he himself clearly knows, but one that he shouldn't have actually spoken out.
Tell him how Annie nearly crushed me like an insect.
Again, they were separated from Annie for a reason. Currently, no one in the 104th Court knows that Annie has been defeated. And the thing is, judging by Armin's reaction, I think you can easily make a case that in the sub, Armin briefly returns to the memory, which again, they would actually use to justify Reiner's status as a traitor, but at this point in time, judging by just how scared Reiner appears to be, I think you could say that Armin genuinely trusts him. This is the first time he has ever seen Reiner so shaken up. So maybe it is him recalling that memory and then thinking, maybe we were wrong. Maybe there was nothing more to it. In the dub, on the other hand, with Reiner calling Annie by her name, also implying that he breaks character already here, the focus on Armin might rather be a case of him being the first to notice that Reiner should not know this information. To Eren and the others, at this point, it's a given. They just fought Annie, so yes, the female Titan is Annie. Simple as that, and they don't even give it a second thought when Reiner also calls her by her name. It's the same thing we saw with the can, right? When Ymir talks about it, Reiner just accepts it without even saying a word, but it's then that something clicks in his mind. But when it comes to our glorious bullhead, he catches it right off the bat. And so him returning to the memory is rather a, oh wait, we were right. So depending on how you read the scene, this is either a mess up on the dub's part, or potentially just a very slight remix on when Reiner begins to break character. Personally, I'm really not that bothered by it, and I don't think it changes that much, but I do think the sub version works better because we have a very explicit breaking points. And speaking of which, it is here where Reiner's fractured mind finally begins to crack. Also, and this might be me overanalyzing, I think you can make an argument that the rain here is meant to sort of wash away the false facade that Reiner had built up, with it ending just as the big reveal actually happens. plenty more on the weather in just a second though. Though Reiner then notes that he made the decision to become a soldier of his own volition, which again, remember Bertolt's cryptic, "No, he used to be a warrior," saying back in Midcard. And to literally give us exactly that, he then says that his mind is going to give out before his body does, as we see a shot of old Bertolt giving him the old stink eye just like always. But then comes the big one. Eren notes that they've been driven far enough from their home as is, saying that they need to get back to work so that they can all return home. And just like that, another clickety-clack clicks in Reiner's brain. The reflection in the puddle immediately showing us the mirror image. Not the soldier from Paradis, but the warrior from Marley. And unlike the soldier Reiner, who was always calm and collected, the reflection is disturbed by the rain and upside down. The whole world turning on its head at this very moment. It's these exact words from Eren that finally break through to the true Reiner hidden deep within. And just as we linger on Bertolt realizing what just happened, we get this slow and dissonant shriek of a violin suddenly cutting through the silence, much like Eren's words just cut through the soldier Reiner. And in a desperate attempt to keep things under control, Bertolt suddenly jumps up, someone who, keep in mind, barely ever says a word. But here, he starts babbling on about how they've done so much and the rest is easy. There's just one more hurdle, etc, etc. Much like with every other chaotic moment, Bertolt immediately tries looking to Reiner for guidance. Only in this case, he just needs to keep him in check first. And so he jumps in trying to steer him back into the rails of the soldier Reiner before he can accidentally spill the beans on something he shouldn't. And this is where the absolute art of this episode comes in, because instead of building suspense through the confusion of Eren or anything like that, we deliberately cut away with the goal of actively leaving us wanting. It puts us in this weird psychological liminal space. Something about that entire sequence was just off. But the answer was left ever so slightly out of reach. And to directly address those worries with, again, a distraction, the same uneasy music plays in the background as we jump on over to Mikasa and Sasha, with Mikasa quickly jumping in to calm Sasha down, because again, the scouts arrived here with the explicit notes of do not raise suspicion, do not raise alarm, do not say anything that might prompt a response. So even with just Connie by their side, Mikasa still jumps in and cuts her worries off at the roots, simply because we are walking on the thinnest ice possible. We thought we had to worry about Reiner and Bertolt when we arrived here, but now Ymir of all people is transformed. So for Mikasa, it is literally as simple as I do not know whether any of you can be trusted and my only concern is Eren. The rest of you, we will deal with you later. Right now, we do not say a word. And in a meta sense, these abruptly cut off scenes just continue building tension because, if you've noticed, not a single sequence or conversation in the episode has ever been properly wrapped up. Each and every one is cut short as we jump to a different group of people talking about completely different worries. Much like with how we just talked about with Reiner, at every opportunity we are thrown off our trail just before we could grasp any meaning.
And now for something completely different.
Just moments after Mikasa tries stopping Sasha from saying something, Hanji pops in saying that normally you'd expect the territory to be brimming with titans, which both reminds us of the perplexing situation we have watched unfold ever since the start of the season, as well as dropping yet another thread of mystery on top of everything we've seen in this episode alone. And as if on cue, Hannes then rounds the corner and says exactly that. We have covered the wall back and forth, but there is no breach. So at this point in time, we are dealing with the impossible reality of there being titans within the walls, despite there being nowhere they can even come from. We have just retrieved files potentially implicating two of our own as traitors. Another one of our own has suddenly unveiled that they too are a shifter completely out of left field, and we also have a literal royal among us that, for some explicable reason, was purposely hidden from everyone. We are reminded of each and every one of these mysteries with the goal of never allowing to stew on any of them. To plan both us as well as the characters in a place of complete and absolute uncertainty. Much like the storm around us, we are clouded in a sense of fear that something is lurking just around the corner. And to vocalize those fears, as they walk off, Armin begins to ponder, why is all of this happening now, after 5 years of nothing? With Mikasa noting that the world just keeps getting more and more confusing. Keep in mind that Trust too happened just out of the blue 5 years after the Wall of Shiganshina. But there, everything was super straightforward. The Colossal reappears, destroys the gates, and that's it, right? It is certainly horrifying, but there at least things play out roughly the same as they did with Shiganshina. Well now, things are much different because no one understands the tiniest bit of what is going on here. We are 6 episodes deep into the season and we don't even know where the Titans are coming from. And with that, in a classic case of very foreshadowy speak, Armin's questions of why all of this is suddenly going down is immediately exemplified by Reiner, who calls on Eren to talk. And it's from this point on that Attack on Titan pulls what is just about the most perfect execution of a reveal I have ever seen in my life. Without a second thought, Reiner casually says,
5 years ago, we compromised Walmaria and launched an attack on humanity.
And that's it. We cut away to Hanji casually throwing out ideas about Titans digging tunnels and whatnot. It is the director literally forcing you to ask, wait, what? If you had tuned out by this point, this is where your eyes bulge and you rewind, because surely he did not just say that. The fact that the unambiguously biggest reveal of the series is dropped with absolutely no build-up, no fanfare, and is then literally cut away from is just about the boldest move I have ever seen in cinema. And the fact that their identities are revealed as background voices as we yet again cut to Hanji in the forefront talking about Ymir, perfection.
Hard to find.
I'm the Armored Titan. He's the Colossal.
The show explains nothing. It is the most matter-of-fact statement possible, almost as if we knew it all along. And that is exactly why I kept stressing this trend of distractions in this episode. Because in any other scenario, you would obviously say that such a reveal should have been given room to breathe, right? I mean, it is the biggest mystery that started the entire series. But no. It could have been a 10-second close-up of Eren's mouth falling open as the shock sets in, but no. It leverages the medium itself to push that shock onto you and force the viewer to become that 10-second shocked Pikachu. Even now, when it literally gives you the answer, it leaves the follow-up just barely out of reach, giving you the slightest moment of doubts, because surely he didn't just say that, right? It challenges the very expectations and perceptions of anime and TV in general, because again, surely that just didn't happen. This is something so out of left field that it literally transcends the story itself, because you don't just say that. And that is the brilliant thing about it, because exactly like Eren in universe, you are now forced into denial, because something just changed and we don't even believe it. For us, it might not be trust, but those preconceived notions are what tell us, no, that didn't just happen. Eren trusted Reiner, so he can be a Titan. Well, we have seen anime, this could not have been a reveal. And as if deliberately wanting to leave you in that shock for just a moment longer, we then jump on over to the Midcard describing the lifts. Which, like, cool. But, what did he just say? And yes, I do think that this too is deliberate. Even in this meta form of using the eye catcher to force in those extra seconds of suspense, it continues with exactly what I've been talking about today. Giving you just so many tidbits of information, but never following up on any of them. And no, this is not me doing the same thing, but before we return to the episode, I want to quickly address the usual question that pops up with all of the Marley shenanigans. That being, why now? And in this case, I think it's a mix of practical but also psychological factors all converging and creating this huge blow-up. First off, it's just important to note that no one yet knows that Eren has the Founder. This is something a lot of people seem to forget, but the Founder's power is only revealed at the end of Season 2. So just like with Trost, nothing here relates to that at all. Secondly, as far as Reiner and Bertolt are concerned, Annie is still perfectly fine. They do not know of what happened in Stoas, so to them, whatever happens here, Annie will still be able to escape alongside them. So it's not a reason to reveal themselves, but rather a reason not to hide, if you will. Thirdly, they of course know that Eren has a Titan, most likely the Attack Titan, and he just so happens to be right here. Just like they already considered capturing him in Trost, this is another opportunity. Further strengthened by the fact that the entirety of the Levi squad is now dead, Levi himself is not present, and the Gigabrain Erwin is not either. There are still plenty of strong scouts, including Mikasa, but all things considered, it's as good of an opportunity as they could reasonably imagine. And I mean, hey, we know that it worked, so. But number 4, and I think this is a very important one, they now know who has the jaw. Keep in mind that they lost Marcel even before starting the mission. That's exactly why returning to Marley was never even an option to consider. Returning empty-handed is one thing. Returning and telling them that you also lost one of their titans? Well, that is a very big yikes. but now they have found the jaw all over again. And more importantly, they now also have the Attack Titan. So at this point, this is the first ever time where this entire mission would actually be a net positive. So from their perspective, it is literally just a case of we didn't complete the mission, but we retrieved another shifter that we can now redeploy to finish what we started. And of course, unbeknownst to them, Eren holds both the Attack and the Founder. So if they did succeed in the mission we are about to see, they would have actually recaptured all of the Titans for Marley without even knowing. And of course, number 5, Reiner's psyche simply cracks. He danced with death a little too closely, and frankly, he's sick of the mission. Keep in mind that because of the curse of Ymir, they only have 13 years to live, 5 of which he has spent on Paradis, and we don't even know exactly how long he has already had the Armored. I mean, what's even the point of completing the mission if when you return, you're just going to die immediately? Clearly, as we've seen, Reiner is afraid of death, and he wants to return to his loved ones. But if he returns and has like 2 days, I mean, is that really a life? We would of course see exactly the type of damage his time on Paradis inflicted on him in the final season. So as much as there are many rational arguments to why revealing themselves here makes sense, it is also a very emotional decision. Though in story, just like I mentioned a moment ago, Eren just completely writes off what they're saying, simply asking, "What? Where would you even take me?" His face too being shown in a reflection, showing the duality in Eren and him actually considering this offer before pulling back. Because again, he is very much in denial right now, and he trusts Reiner. And before we dive deeper into all of this, we jump back in time to what we saw just a few episodes before, with Sasha delivering the personal files of the Marley trio. If you've been following along with the Overanalyzing series, you'll be sick of hearing this already, but we finally explicitly addressed the whole plan discrepancy that Erwin sketched in all the way back in Season 1. Also addressing Reiner's suspicious actions during the Female Titan mission, and of course implicitly also showing us exactly why the Female Titan mission was kept under wraps this entire time. It was exactly because we suspected more traitors in the 104th Corps, and Erwin was simply waiting on the papers to come through before he could investigate them one by one. And also note that deep thump here, followed by this deep pulse as Reiner's and Bertolt's identities are revealed.
And Bertolt Hoover.
It's just some really cool sound design to, once again, build suspense. But yes, much like we talked about just a few episodes ago with Levi telling Eren to learn some restraints, all of this just clues us into why everyone atop the wall is acting so standoffish, with Hanji even barely acknowledging the fact that Ymir is yet another shifter. As we all know, Hanji does often get wacky goofy, but we also know that they are super cold and calculated. So even with Historia pleading and telling them that Ymir saved them, Hanji's one and only thought is, do not give them an inch. We do not know what is going on here. Tread lightly. Though jumping back to the present, just like I think many of us watching the series for the first time, Eren is in complete denial. I mean, Reiner and Bertolt casually announced their titans. Why would they do that? Why haven't they transformed yet? Why do they even want to take Eren somewhere? None of this makes any sense. And so Eren says just that, saying that, no, it's just stress getting to your head, come on, let's get going. And I can't stress this enough, but this is the biggest reveal of the series, and we have spent like 5 minutes talking about it. That should seem ridiculous, right? Again, it's those preconceived notions. We have all seen anime. Why are we not fighting? Why are we still talking about this? Though Bertolt, as he often does, gets super defensive. And even now that Reiner has literally told them who they are, he tries pulling back. Quite a few times in this series, we've already seen how he looks to Reiner and even sort of needs his permission, I guess, to do anything. But again, in a meta sense, it just adds confusion to everything going on. The great leader and our loyal friend Reiner is a traitor, but his quiet and standoffish friend is now blurting out lines about how they're still okay? And this single shot of their faces is just beautiful. Reiner's mind currently is just cracking. He, the warrior, just told Eren that they are trying to kill all of humanity within the walls. But Eren tells the soldier Reiner that no, they are allies. All the while the usual non-committal burrito just watches Reiner. It is this stop-all moment where Reiner is literally stuck between the warrior Bertolt and his fellow soldier Eren, and both claim to be his friends. And so, Reiner's split personality finally snaps. And notice the clouds in the background, see just how fast they are moving. It is not a static background, and they are suddenly moving far faster than in the rest of the episode. The speed of the clouds themselves almost telling you that the world is turning at breakneck speed. And as we return to that reflection on the floor once again, it is now shaken to its very, very core by a huge gust of wind. But then, silence. We get the most breathtaking example of the calm before, with all sound cutting out just as the red flag I talked about at the very start of this episode is snapped off and sent flying off the wall. The echo ringing unnaturally long, almost like that ringing in your ears just moments before you're about to faint. But this is it. The red flag is gone. We were warned time and time again, but it is too late. And while I call this the calm before the storm, it is actually the complete opposite, because the rain does not return. Rather, a glimmer of sunshine shines through, much like it did in Trost with Eren being reborn. Only this time, that sunshine is for Reiner, as it parts the clouds in his mind and breaks away the false facade that is the soldier Reiner. And it's at that moment where that cold and almost tactical music kicks in. A absolute far cry from the uneasy strings and pulses we had heard throughout the entire episode. Despite this being a massive breaking point, the tone shifts to a meticulous and calculated tune, which in my opinion I think applies to both Reiner and Mikasa. Reiner at this point is done. The path ahead of him is crystal clear. They end it here and now. But Mikasa's instincts are already kicking into gear, so her mind is also exactly this. A calm, calculated, and tactical tune as she grips her blades, ready to pounce on both at a moment's notice. But with that, the metaphorical storm is finally here as we focus on Reiner. The clouds now moving even faster as if the whole world had begun to accelerate. Half of his face now being illuminated by the sun, again cutting through the false facade that he had so carefully constructed to the point that he literally disconnected from reality, while the other remains shrouded in darkness. And the monologue he goes on here, chef's kiss. We just see a complete meltdown. Him saying that he's been here for far too long, 3 years surrounded by idiots, clearly blaming the soldiers on Paradis. But he also then says, we were just kids, his aim now turning to Marley. At this very moment, I think the easiest way to describe it is that he hates the world and he just wants this to be over. And so, he does exactly that. He says he has to face the world to the end as a warrior. The Titan regeneration finally kicking in as he casually lifts his arm out of the sling. And even now, we see Bertolt just begging for a command. Even now, he cannot commit. And to challenge all of those beliefs all over again, Mikasa breaks the ultimate anime rule, leaping forward and lodging her blades in both of them, as a now somber choir slowly fades into the background. But as Eren simply stands there in complete disbelief, the music does a complete 180. As we realize that Mikasa's attack was not enough, it turns into this electric and scratchy, yet almost ethereal and otherworldly soundscape. A lone woman's voice, oddly peacefully, guides us through what can only be described as an absolute symphony of destruction. That chaotic, crackling lightning being sharply juxtaposed by the slow and flowing voice. To me, it is genuinely nothing short of breathtaking. This isn't a heroic turn as we saw with Eren and Stoas and his transformation kicking in. No, this is almost a heavenly voice leading us into what is a somber betrayal. There is nothing triumphant about this. This is a fight we did not want. Eren is not angry here, there are tears streaming from his face. All of those little cutaways and reminders of our strong bonds throughout this episode finally climax in this fundamental shift in the world as we knew it. And the almost transcendent and detached vocals here accompanying their transformation is just beautiful. Again, I keep saying this, but these are two Titan shifters transforming at the same exact time. Yet somehow, that is the only intensity in this sequence. The rest is just a sorrowful and tragic tale of betrayal. Further strengthened by Bertolt immediately grabbing Ymir just moments after she and Historia made their true selves known. And when you listen to the lyrics of the song, oh boy. Tears, anger, pity, cruelty. Peace, chaos, faith, betrayal. We will fight against our fates. We will not give in to destiny. With sadness and decision in our hearts, we show our will to go further. With what we know now in the story, I think these lyrics go both sides. Because we of course also know that this isn't just a betrayal from Eren's perspective. We know full well that neither Reiner, nor Bertolt, nor Annie wanted any of this. Everything here is no more than a cruel twist of fate pitting friends against one another for some grander plan that neither side understands. As we've talked about many times before, at the very heart of the Attack on Titan story, it is a tragic tale of the cycle of hatred. And to me, all of that is conveyed in this single sequence. As much as there are deaths and even more cruel twists later in the series, the events of this episode still stand out as some of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire show. But don't forget, you are watching Overanalyzing. So let me just instantly drop all of that emotion to the wayside because there is something very important to note. The dub here takes an absolutely uncontested W. The dub here actually adds a completely new and absolutely monstrous bellowing roar cutting through that somber tune and sharply juxtaposing the high-pitched singing. I am so very sorry if I ruined the scene in the sub for you, because with how many times I've rewatched the show both dubbed and subbed, the lack of that roar really catches me off guard each and every time now. Like seriously, this is something I cannot unsee ever again. Though with tears in his eyes, for one final time, the music shifts. That beautiful, somber voice fades as Eren finally chomps down, and the now familiar pulsing beat kicks in, accompanied by Eren's sadness turned rage-fueled roars. And with that, we have weathered the absolute cocktail of emotion that is, in my opinion, the greatest reveal in Attack on Titan. So now, let us finally see the climax of all of that in the first proper brawl of Eren and Reiner. Considering this is our first solo episode in quite a while, and it's longer than most double episodes, I think you'll agree when I say that this one is truly something special. And if I could get someone super into music, I think there's another like 30 minutes worth of musical and even cinematography analysis to be done with the wall sequence alone. But yes, my voice is once again completely gone, so all that said, next time we're getting right into the climax of the Titans clashing arc, so I hope to see you back as we continue overanalyzing Attack on Titan. And that's the video. Needless to say, I expected this one to be a bit of a chonker, but this was actually the longest script we've had in the series so far. Yes, even surpassing the first episode, which was actually a longer video, but not a longer script. And by the way, yeah, the next video is also a solo episode, and it's also like 30-something minutes, so you know. And on that note, I really want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. The Berserk read-alongs are finally going up if you're interested in those. But let's also give a warm welcome to the newest member of the team, Valeria Elizabeth Morales Brissoles? Sorry if I butchered the name, but without you there'd be a whole lot less of my ramblings, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!